Well, thankfully we don't have any drones in here, but we do have one final panelist who's coming up, or one final speaker who's coming up. And it's an individual from a beer company who's probably like the only beer company at this point that we haven't talked to over the last couple days, or I should say large beer company that we haven't talked to, and that's Pabst Brewing. And I know a lot of you were hoping to see Pabst chairman Eugene Kasper here today. He's still wrapped up in a lawsuit with Miller Coors, as I'm sure you guys have read about in the trade press, and he couldn't break away from the courtroom to be with us today. But we do have Matt Bruhn, who was recently named Pabst GM and is responsible for all day-to-day commercial operations, including marketing, sales, and people and culture. Prior to being named GM, he was the CMO of Pabst, and I guess you're probably still doing some of that as well. You're kind of running the show now. He's currently working to reinvent some of Pabst's iconic beer brands. He's got a unique perspective on the ways that the beer category has evolved with the onslaught of new craft offerings, and why breweries shouldn't be abandoning the light beer or domestic beer segments of the category. Over the years, Matt has actually worked in a ton of different industries, from cigarettes to breakfast foods to spirits, so he brings a little bit of a different point of view to the beer category that might be refreshing for some of you. So here to talk about how Pabst is going to evolve in 2019 and to share his thoughts on the beer category is Matt Bruhn. Come on up, let's chat. By the way?
There's no PBR out there, so no.
Always be brand loyal.
There
That's
you
the
go.
first rule,
Got to
right?
drive some depletion somehow.
Well, if you're not drinking it, then...
Yeah, no one else is.
Yeah. Well, the Double Sunshine from Lawson's is pretty good. I think Sean had to pack it in his suitcase to get out here.
Nice.
So
I'll check it out later.
maybe we can convince you
Cool.
off screen. Now that you're sort of tasked, as I mentioned, with shaping Pabst's strategy moving forward, what are some of your top priorities moving into 2019, and how are you going to get Pabst back to growth next year?
Well, we're not really starting with the desire to get back to growth per se. That's obviously a long-term objective for the business. For us, it's more around how do we help the beer industry and the beer category understand how it's going to get the entire category back to health after what has been a few years of kind of weakness and increasing consumer issues for beer as a category, and facing the ongoing pressure of spirits, wine, and then obviously other products as they get potentially legalized. So we're more invested and interested in how we grow the category and return focus to consumers and culture, and away from the dialogue that's become an obsessive beer industry monologue. We think there's a bit of groupthink going on in beer, which we need to break, and we're going to focus ourselves, retailers and hopefully distributors, on consumer growth.
Yeah, you call it groupthink, I call it the echo chamber.
Sure.
What is that groupthink in your opinion?
Well, I spent 12 years in the spirits business with Diageo, both in the US, Asia, and Australia. And as a spirits industry, they have been fixated on stealing consumers and winning occasions from beer. And I think beer has industry, for the most part, from what I can see from those 12 years, was concerned about itself and shuffling the deck chairs and really not focusing on consumers. So if you look at kind of penetration of beer amongst the younger consumers, it's on the decline. And more importantly, it's structured not appropriately based on the demographic shifts of America. So with 42 to 44% of millennial population, largest buying group in America, being multicultural, you want to be positioned with relativity to that market size. Domestic premium beer is 30% multicultural, 70% white. So immediately you go, well, there's a long-term problem here unless we shift that. And craft beer, which has been the growth engine of the industry, is worse than that. It's 20% multicultural, 80% white. So at a beer category level, our products, brands, and whatever you want to say isn't connected to the real demographics of America, and increasingly not the growth segments. 50% of alc beverage growth in the next 10 years will be driven by Hispanic consumers. And again, we're not profiled well as a collective industry to meet that changing consumer base. Alternatively, on the spirits side, they are, and they have been focused for 15, 20 years and understanding demographic shifts, and have been very, very strong in kind of realising the growth in that way. So the industry, I think, focuses on which craft segment's going to grow next, not what consumer they need to attract most.
Yeah. What makes Pabst the right company to sort of take the lead on driving that shift in the way that we think? Because you talk about the changing demographics of the United States, and I think about your brands, and they're today not really brands that I would expect to appeal to those demographics either.
Sure. Well, if it's not going to be us, who's it going to be?
Constellation, perhaps?
That's the first rule in any conversation, which is if you see a problem, fix the problem. So we've been in the industry for 174 years. We'd like to be in the industry for 174 more, and we'd like to see the industry in growth. So if that's our truth, then we need to serve it. So we will. I think the representation of our brands not being necessarily connected to that changing demographics is wrong, frankly. And actually, Pabst Blue Ribbon has a much stronger index against millennials, multicultural millennials, than many of our other domestic partners. So that's untrue. Also, what's untrue is that PBR wasn't re-identified and re-picked up by an emergent kind of demographic back in the early thousands. So it has history of reconnecting and connecting with the changing nature of culture. So that's true. What's also true is Lone Star in Texas is incredibly high consumption amongst Hispanic consumers. So our brands have deep roots in America's values of kind of entrepreneurialism. And so they have the history, the codes, the values that, modern day Americans, love. So there's absolutely every right for our brands to connect with that changing demographics. And additionally, we're somewhat of an independent voice in the market. We're kind of somewhere between a large-scale brewer and really a culturally connected lifestyle company, and more akin to the kind of the craft world. So we are in a nice hybrid position, and we're small enough to take risks. So we can, happily, take a few punts that maybe the bigger guys can't, and we can also be pretty honest with retailers, because we're not just trying to get them to range 6 new pack formats of an existing brand. We are certainly in a smaller space that we can kind of be more honest with retailers and with distributors.
What are some of those risks you guys are going to take next year?
Well, for Pabst Blue Ribbon, we're for the first time already at the moment extending it into the lighter beer market. So that's seen as an identifiable risk. It's the first time we've really line extended PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon, in maybe forever. We've done some kind of adjunct stuff over time, so APA and kind of tankard ale, but this is the first time the ribbon exists on a really clear into the lighter segment. So we're doing that. We've got a lot of other innovation coming on PBR as well. We're also breaking category conventions and moving Pabst Blue Ribbon beyond traditional lager space, and we're entering into the flavoured malt space for Pabst Blue Ribbon. We're also extending Pabst Blue Ribbon beyond beer, and we're going into to spirits as well with the Blue Ribbon. So we're launching spirits from Pabst Blue Ribbon in January, February, to kind of build the brand as a complete lifestyle drinks offering. So that's a pretty bold move. We've also started directing most of our communication towards millennials who represent that kind of growth segment, and particularly multicultural Americans and the female as well. So we're taking some pretty strong social media and general media risks in that space as well.
What's the reception been like?
Yeah, it's been great. They're an underserved community, right? The beer industry hasn't really spoken to the diverseness of America directly. Certainly, the most of the growth in the industry in the last sort of 5 years has been the craft sector. With all due respect to the craft sector, it isn't really connected with what America looks like today or moving forward. So much of the noise in the system in beer hasn't been really directed at that 21-year-old kid who's half the time likely to be a multicultural kid. So there's a lot of positive response. Equally, there's some rejection.
Yeah.
And America's a very divided country right now. We stand on both sides of the aisle. In living in California, you don't feel it, but you do kind of see it. So there are some difference of opinions, right?
It's going to take an Aussie to unite us all, huh?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, we come here mainly for the acting jobs and the bar jobs that we end up getting. So,
and the PBR jobs.
Sure, yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. There's something increasingly interesting about an immigrant running a beer company, given that we were founded by immigrants as a company. Jacob Best was an immigrant, as was Captain Pabst. So maybe there's something in that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, history always repeats itself, right?
There you go.
So you talk about taking the PBR brand into all these different areas, the light beer space. You're also taking it into the non-alcoholic space.
Yep.
And you're doing that with some of your other brands
Yeah.
going into the light beer space as
Yeah.
well. Why are you guys so bullish on light beer at a time when the major brands, Miller Coors and AB, are losing considerable volume with those products?
Yeah, I just don't think it's a real category mindset to be happy and excited that 60% of America's consumed beer is down 5 or 6%. I think that there's a lot of talk and this kind of general reveling in the fact that Bud and Bud Light and Miller and Coors Light might be in decline, but I think that's really negative because that still represents the majority of what Americans want to drink. The overwhelming majority of Americans want to drink traditional American domestic premium lagers. It's the largest volume segment of the market. I mean, lighter American lagers represent 35% of all American beer drunk.
Yep.
Still the largest segment by volume, by value, by profit, by all metrics. It's still significant, right? And so we think there's value collectively in trying to work together to ensure that the largest segment of the American beer market, the largest, most important segment of the beer market is maintained. Because it doesn't matter how much work is done on either side of craft or FMB, retailers will continue to be concerned about 50 to 60% of the volume that remains in the box. It drives the traffic, it drives the average rate of purchase, it drives so much of the important valuable contributors to the category. So we value domestic premium, we increasingly value super domestic premium as well. And we want to participate in that segment more fully. Not just to win share, but also to bring energy to the domestic premium segment.
Yeah. The big thing that's kind of staring you guys in the face, though, is the lack of a brewery footprint as you guys pursue this, light beer approach.
Sure.
You're still, kind of reliant on Miller Coors as a brewery partner, and
Sure.
remains to be seen what happens with that. Worst case scenario being you guys don't have a partnership with them and you've gone after a strategy that requires large amounts of capacity. What do you do?
Well, Prohibition didn't kill us. We'll work it out.
How would you do it?
I'm not going to comment on how we're going to strategically structure our supply chain. That would be A, stupid, and B, illegal. If we were publicly traded, you asked me for some share tips at the same time. Look, the strategy is the right one for our business. We're a brewer for everyone, right? We're an average American beer company that makes average American beer for average Americans who make average money. Most Americans make 35 to 40 grand a year. They don't have more than $10 to pay for a six-pack. They just want a lager. They want a decent beer, to reflect on the day, to connect with their friends, to have barbecues and socialise. That's what we make. We don't make bougie high-end. We don't make luxury craft. We make average American beer. And we're honestly really proud of that fact. And we'll keep doing that. It's what we started with 174 years ago,
Yeah.
and that's what we'll keep doing.
Yeah.
So we'll work it out. Hopefully it works itself out around the next few hours in Milwaukee. But we'll wait and see what the jury says.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys are definitely unapologetic about your approach, that's for sure.
Sure.
But it is a complete 180 from the strategy that you guys had not too long ago. I mean, I distinctly recall sitting in Milwaukee listening to Eugene and other folks from within the organization talk about the high end and $25+ per case and striking partnerships with New Holland Brewing, and you guys have another craft partnership as well with Against the Grain. As you guys shift your strategy, what do you do about those craft partnerships, A, and B, how has it changed so quickly to go from, hey, we're going after this high-end piece of the market to, nah, we're back to domestic light beer as our primary focus, and we're gonna go all in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in with the business just on 12 months, so I won't comment on retrospective strategy. What I will say is we feel what we're doing today is in service of the category at large. We think it's the best thing and the best role for us is to make sure that the boxes still move in the largest beer segment, make sure the consumers, next generation's consumers come in and are participating in the beer category ongoingly, right? So that we think that's our best role in the category. That being said, we're happy to help craft partners from time to time, right? When it's suitable, when it's fitting. But what we're not going to do is clutter up craft any further. It's already an incredibly complex, over-supported marketplace. And what we're not going to do as a company is increase that. We think there's plenty of people that have craft credentials that will continue to participate in craft effectively. If we can help some of them, we will, but we're not going to aggressively pursue expansion into the craft space and further exacerbate the issues of complexity in the craft beer market. Yeah.
It's not necessarily a craft product per se, but it was certainly driving a whole ton of profits for the business, and that's the Not Your Father's root beer product, which was, I guess you would describe it as sort of a boom splat phenomenon. It went up really fast and kind of came down hard. How are you guys rebounding from that, and what are the plans for that brand?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's been in the F&B industry for long enough, and I certainly witnessed it at Diageo when we had Smirnoff Ice exploding in the early thousands. F&Bs, they have cycles. They have life cycles that are very short, and you have to accept that as a reality. That's how the consumers shift in that market. Not Your Father's was an overnight success and then an overnight failure. So we'll stabilise that brand going into 2019. We've done some things around pricing and product and SKU mix, rationalisation, pretty effective rationalisation we're going through now. It's not really a core focus for the business. I mean, we own America's most nostalgic, longest history beer brands. That's our focus. We have PBR. I mean, it's still, way cooler than any other domestic beer brand in the market. Like, it is still a cool brand. We have heaps of other brands, some of which are not even in the market, like Lucky Lager, which is it was Jimi Hendrix's beer, right? That's where we'll focus. We own some of the coolest traditional American lager beers of the past. And that's why Eugene bought the business. That's what attracted him to it. It's what attracted me to join this business.
Yeah.
I mean, as a career marketer, now broadening into also helping with sales, you join businesses because you think there's something intrinsic in the brands that they have or could have, right? With Pabst, the only reason I joined is because you go, well, wait a minute, open up this book, and you've got every brand from every market that was ever successful. We've got Jack's out of New Orleans, we've got Schaefer out of New York, we've got Knickerbocker. We've just got this incredible list of what could be the renaissance of American lager. And that's what excites me. We want to be the company that makes American lager attractive to the next generation, and we have some of the coolest brands to do that, and that's where our focus will be.
Yeah, when you have so many heritage brands like that, where do you start? Outside of PBR.
Where do you start? I mean, we have kind of one big brand, and then we have 5 next wave brands. We have Lone Star, National Bohemia, Stag, Rainier, and Olympia. They're our next big 5 brands. So those 6 brands make up most of our business. And then after that, we pick and choose based on where the brand is at in its life stage, what's the marketplace like. So for the relaunches, we pick markets we think have got growth potential, like San Francisco for Lucky's got growth potential. We're relooking at Stroh because Detroit is changing as a marketplace. So we kind of look at the brands, we look at the cultural situation, and we make choices based on where we think the opportunity is.
So you guys are going to relaunch the Lucky brand?
Yeah, right. Lucky relaunches Q1 next year. We're brewing back in San Francisco, back in the Bay Area. We relaunch the brand early next year.
How do you communicate that message to people who might be completely unaware of the Lucky brand?
Well, it's like all kind of marketing and communication. It starts with appropriate location and distribution, making sure it's in the influential locations, making sure it's connected to the community and the cultural influences that make a difference in the Bay Area. And we'll go through that, and then traditional marketing methods from there, social, traditional advertising, etc. on top.
Are you reaching out to like influencers, or I mean, what's the strategy as you guys start to relaunch some of these things? Putting up a billboard, or
influencers is a bit of a cliche term, and I think that this was a marketing conference, we'd be all talking about it. No, I think what's more important is people with shared values and common beliefs who can advocate for you, whether that's a bartender or that's a person who does fashion design. So we've got a certain purpose. The lady before from Three Weavers, I don't know if she's still here, was talking about the why brands exist. I think that's essentially really important. And for Lucky Lager, it's establishing that whilst the Bay Area is a little lucky right now through the Silicon Valley boom, it's also a lot of hard work and a lot of gritty, tough times. So it's establishing how we work within the reality of what the cultural conditions are, and re-establish what luck means to the next generation that are coming through in the Bay Area. What's also really cool about the way we're launching Lucky is we're launching it in 5 different languages from day one, given the multicultural nature of the Bay Area, and the scale of the populations beyond English speaking. So we're actually launching the brand with the brand name in 5 different languages from day one.
That is very interesting. You talked about some of the sort of noise and the oversaturation in the craft market. And, when we spoke earlier this month, you sort of mentioned to me that the way that the beer market has skewed so heavily towards craft has actually been a drag on the overall business. Can you sort of elaborate on that for our audience today, why you think the category went too hard on craft and why it needs to sort of, why the pendulum needs to swing back?
Well, it's all about balance, right? It's all about appropriately representing the marketplace as it stands. I mean, if I go back to the core stats, right? 65% of all beer in America sold is in that kind of domestic premium, super premium, traditional lager, light lager space. I don't think the retailers, the distributors, the manufacturers have spent equal time to scale on that category. It has lost traction with the next generation consumer, and they have shifted from the core of the industry to move and spend overly incremental amount of time on what is a small segment of the market. I mean, craft beer is between 7 and 10% of the market, depending on how you want to categorize it, right? And I think it's been 50% of the effort. Now, I'm not saying it needs to go to be 0% of the effort. There's nothing. Craft is amazing. Craft is a beautiful representation of how great beer can be. But it can't be the only thing that the industry is talking about and focusing on, right? Because as fast as craft can grow, right, the losses in Bud and Bud Light and Miller Lite alone will render the category a decline category. Now, as soon as beer becomes a decline category for Walmart, Walgreens, any of the major retailers, and spirits is right there at 4 or 5% growth at great margins, suddenly they're going, why do I need that much space for beer? Why do I need that many ad buckets for beer when I can shift them across to the spirits aisle or to the wine aisle, right? So it's about balance. It's about accepting that collectively we need to grow the category, getting more consumers into the category, buying more products when they arrive, and having a much more balanced approach to the industry, because that's what I'm not seeing as a dialogue of the industry right now. It seems very heavy to one segment, which is great. It's been the growth segment and it's awesome, but we just need to find a better, more appropriate balance based on the real makeup of the beer category.
Sure. Where would the beer category be if it weren't for craft, though? I mean, if craft didn't come on like it did, it seems like we'd be in an even worse position.
That's a hypothetical. I mean, it's kind of like, what if maybe didn't, I tell you what, if the large-scale domestic premium brand owners had done a better job recruiting next-generation consumers, imagine if you had a situation where craft was growing and fabulous, adding incremental dollars to the category, but domestic premium was doing its job, which was recruiting. Every craft brewer in the world should want PBR to recruit 21-year-old beer drinkers, because they may eventually become a craft drinker. You should all be rooting for our success. Every one of you should be out there going, I want PBR to kill it, because it will recruit 21 to 24-year-old next-generation beer drinkers who may one day turn into craft drinkers, right? PBR is going to bring in African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, Anglos, in their droves, in their millions, that we can convert to being craft drinkers long term. What I would say, what the industry shouldn't have done is go, domestic premium needs to be isolated, reduced, because all the growth's going to come over here. What it should have said is, no, we don't accept that we will lose consumers and we will lose shoppers from the largest segment of the market. Let's grow it and grow the other segments. I can tell you what, the spirits industry doesn't stand around going, craft bourbon is on fire, let's let Jack Daniels decline. That's just ludicrous. I mean, the bourbon market...
They line extend with something like Gentleman Jack.
Sure, but at a retail level, at a manufacturer level, the core brands in spirits have been growing for a decade, and they added craft on top. That's success, right?
Yeah.
Right? For 10 years, Crown Royal, Jack Daniels, Bullet, Beam, Smirnoff have been in growth, recruiting next generation drinkers, and then the small guys, the Buffalo Tracers and the guys on top, they're doing well as well. So the whole industry grows together. What we have in the beer industry is craft grows, domestic premium dies. And we can't accept that, because that's not good long term.
You guys, I'm getting this visual in my head of the entire Pabst organization as pirates coming on, just jumping onto the domestic beer ship and saying,
it's cool. I like that, because
we need to take this over.
Yeah, well, Captain Pabst was an actual captain. He ran 3 ships before he decided to take over the business from Jacob Best, and he only did that because he injured himself while sailing. So I do like the nautical analogy that you're using there.
Oh, the first one's free, all right?
We didn't even talk about this in the pre-setup, but I'm glad you've brought it back there. That's cool.
I guess the big question for me when you think about, or when I hear you talk about how Pabst is going to bring some energy back to the category, how it's going to recruit all these new drinkers, is why can't craft do that too? Why can't craft brewers also start talking?
They should.
Too?
Yeah.
So how can they do it?
This is not an or conversation. This is an and conversation. We all should be focused on accepting the reality of America moving forward. Will be in 20 years from now, 56% of America will be brown. Right? Okay. So if you're in the craft industry, statistically speaking, 80% of all your beer is sold to white people. 20% of it, statistically, is sold to multiculturals. Change it. I don't know exactly how you're going to do it individually, but collectively as an industry, if you want to participate in growth in America in the next 10 years, it will not just come from the Anglo-white market, it will come from the changing demographics. And that's the reality. In California alone, tomorrow, when people turn 21, half of them will be Hispanic. 50% in California tomorrow. The people who turn 21 will be Hispanic. So we have to be reality checked on that, what's happening demographically, and everyone in the industry should be focused on it. And collectively, we can recruit new consumers to beer. Because what's wrong with beer? Fucking nothing. Beer's awesome, right? Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I spent 12 years at Diageo, and we spent literally tens of millions of dollars to find out what was wrong with beer. Because the only...
What'd you learn? We all want to know.
There's fucking nothing wrong with beer. That's what young men and women around the world say. Well, nothing wrong with beer. It's great. It's simple. It's easy. It's safe. It's social. It's all good things, right? And if you're a 21-year-old person who wants to enjoy an alcoholic beverage for the first time, absolutely for the first time when you turn 21, except if you live in Australia where we can have it at 18. Maybe that's my legacy, is to try and get America to convert to 18 or not. I'm not sure about that.
That is a lofty goal.
That's a lofty potential volume opportunity. So as a 21-year-old consumer coming in to have your first alcoholic beverage, a tall boy or a 12-ounce of easy drinking, delicious American lager is such a delightful way to enter in to the alcohol beverage segment, right? It's not particularly high on the alcohol content. It's nice and sessionable, super drinkable. Still has some sort of sense of maturity and alcohol flavour to it. But it's just a really social, connected way to enjoy the alcohol category. So we should all be proud of the industry we work in. I've been in Alc Bev for 13, 14 years, and I am super proud of being in the industry. It's an incredibly fun industry. It keeps you really young as an industry because you're still going out, you're still going to pubs, you're still going to clubs, you're still going to things that you shouldn't be at 40 years old. So it's super fun. Consumers should love it. But as an industry, we need to start recognizing who the real consumers are. And for Pabst, it's like just accept that we're just an average American beer company. And that feels great. Right? We sell beer to people who earn 35 to 50 grand a year, who, build houses, lay bricks, and they're part-time, play music or do some whatever else it is. That's who we love to serve. And we're going to keep working that as hard as we can.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like a great strategy, and it'll be interesting to see how you guys execute on that.
Oh, we'll crush it. We'll absolutely deliver. Because everyone in this room now is going to be rooting for PBR to be successful. So when someone
This is a true brainwashing experiment.
Yeah, 100%.
Right here.
Because they're going to go, okay, this 21-year-old guy or girl comes in, crushes the PBR, and by the time they're 21 and a half, they're buying craft beer. And we all win. Because they'll still buy an 18-pack or a 30-pack of PBR. They'll just strap on a 6-pack of craft afterwards. That's our dream, by the way. Our dream is as a beer company is that someone walks in the store, grabs a suitcase of PBR Lone Star Rainier and adds a craft to it.
Yeah.
That's our absolute dream for the industry. Because why? One, you've got big retail volume. You've got great basket ring size. You've got the traffic flow required, and you've added margin. You've added discretionary margin to the purchase, right? So we can encourage, and then you've also got sessionability. The more beers in someone's fridge means the more beers they drink, which means the less spirits they drink. It's basic, right? If you fill your fridge with a case of beer, you will drink that case of beer before you move on to JD's or Bullets, right? Or whatever else your spirits. So the more we get into home, the more we partner up as an industry and work together, the more we can keep beer as a thriving, critical component to retail and bars. The other thing we've got to remind ourselves is the beer is so slow to go e-com. So, most trips where someone goes to buy beer at the retailer were because they were going to buy beer. Right. They went, I'm going to go buy beer. right? They don't get online and shop for fashion and then shop for beer. It's like, I'm going to the shops to buy beer. A retailer needs us. It needs this category, right? And so we have a real position of strength if we work collectively to help the retailer, kind of use the beer category to grow their profits as well.
Well, you bring up the e-com piece of things, and I mean that's coming on obviously with companies like Drizzly.
Sure.
That's changing, and it's slow, but it is changing. And then you talk about just getting consumers to drink more beer or drink beer in general.
Yep.
And we've talked a lot over the last 2 days about non-alcoholic beers.
Yep.
You guys are getting into that segment. So there is still this generation behind that actually wants to moderate consumption, doesn't want to drink as much volume. And so those are sort of divergent strategies.
Yeah, look, I think when you're trying to recruit the younger consumers or the consumers that are coming through, you just got to follow and accept the realities of their choices, right? So it's really bifurcated, right? So you've got 6% and above alcohol growing extraordinarily quickly, right? 8.5% FMB has been just a train for the last few years. So you've got some of those choices, maybe they're driven by value equations or drink it now because I don't have much time to party, so I need to go after it. Equally, you've got other sets of the market that are like health and well-being that's more important to me. So again, focus on the consumer, focus on what they want from their personal experience and give them the products that suit their needs. Don't try and get someone to drink something because that's all you can make, right? Make what they want, right? That's what's key. Just because the brewmaster says, I can make this beer, doesn't in itself make it something you can force down someone's throat. We used to have a saying in Kellogg's, never make a supply problem a consumer solution. Because we would have lines that would run only cornflakes, and if people stopped liking cornflakes, the supply people would come to us and go, force people to eat cornflakes. And we would go, but people don't like cornflakes. They want something else. They go, well, we can't make that. And then we'll go, we'll just go out of business then, right? Right?
Yes.
You're just not, people don't want Nokia 5110s anymore. So if you make Nokia 5110s only, I'm sorry, you're in trouble.
Well, the Snake game was pretty good.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
People don't want Kodak film. They want digital imagery. So you have to accept the consumer's choices and consumers' need will change. Right now, there is a lot of consumers who are going to moderate their consumption. They're going to moderate it for hundreds of reasons, whether it's their lives are 24/7 on video content, so they're worried about embarrassment, whether they're trying to get up in the morning to hustle harder to earn more money, or whether they just want to be healthier. So there's going to be a huge market of health and wellness drinks, and as an industry, we have to move after that. Equally, there's going to be on the other equation people who want higher alcohol drinks because they've got shorter times to party. So we're watching all the changes in the industry and what consumers want rather than studying the beer styles.
And light beer and domestic beer isn't right in the middle of that, kind of caught in the center?
I think lighter lager is still a highly desired product choice by all consumers, right? It still has a liquid profile and a delivery that is still relevant to new consumers entering the market. I do not think, and do I think that a lighter lager is an obsolete category? I think it's just not well positioned and hasn't spoken to the next generation coming in as effectively as it should have.
How successful will the craft companies that are going after that opportunity be because they don't have the scale or the resources that larger companies do?
I think you've got to leverage the assets you own. So if you don't have the ability to infrastructurally participate in a market segment, you either decide you can raise the cash to get after it or you participate in another segment. If you're a craft brewer and you can't participate under $10, then that's your economics reality. You've got to find how to get growth outside that.
But there are craft brewers that are trying.
Sure. I think if you're a craft brewer and you're trying to win new consumers and you believe the way to win new consumers that aren't the ones you already have and that's sub $10 or this style of beer is going to work, then great. get after it. I think anything that we can do collectively to bring in new consumers is something I would absolutely support. Yeah. How successful that'll be, we'll see.
So, other than the lawsuit, the brewery footprint concerns, this entire new strategy that you're about to roll out, is there anything else that's keeping you up, that's making you lose some sleep at night?
Oh, no, I sleep really well.
That is surprising to hear, given
my watch tells me every
discussed.
morning how well I slept, how deep, heart rate, all that sort of stuff. Look, it might sound from an outsider's perspective that we've got lots going on, but we really don't. We just don't. I mean, we've got like 5 things we need to do, and that's it. And we've been on, some of our guys are here, we've been on 13 roadshows around the country meeting with 800 distributors and retailers in the last sort of 6 weeks. Our business is really simple. We probably sell at most 3 or 4 brands in any market. That's it. We sell PBR and maybe a local legend like a Lone Star, and then a bit of kind of FMB on the side. But our business is super simple. You know, Pabst Blue Ribbon has to recruit the next generation. That's its job in the category. It needs to make, you know, American premium domestic beer fun again. And then our legends need to work to kind of instill that local pride. It's a really simple business to run. Our portfolio is pretty narrow by state. And the other kind of above operational concerns, I mean, I'll just leave those to Eugene, right?
Well said.
There you go.
Leave the tough stuff to Eugene. Well, I think it's fitting that we started this conference with a presentation from Andy Thomas about how to simplify and how to cut through some of the complexity and make sense of it all. And you're sitting here at the end of the conference saying, well, it is really simple. All we have to do is go out and, you know, do these couple of things and we'll be all good. So if there's one takeaway from the last 2 days, it's go out and simplify, right?
There you go.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Appreciate
you very
it.
much.